take it away when you're ready. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Guaglione. I'm a reporter for the Publishers Daily vertical at Media Post. And today we have Craig Kostelic. Kostelic.
Yes.
He said it so much better than I
Kostelic,
did.
though, if you
Yeah.
the Croatian, yes.
And you are the Chief Business Officer of Conde Nast for the FIG group, right?
The FIG for
Food
if you're into
Innovation
brevity.
Group, yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, and we can go from there.
Yeah, so I oversee sales, marketing, and brand development for the Food Innovation Group. So the Food Innovation Group is comprised of Bon Appetit, Epicurious, and then we also have an asset called The Farm, which is our experiential agency, and then our influencer network. So, really what I think about on a daily basis is, our legacy and our heritage and our origins are are in the print medium. And obviously that is a challenged market. So it's really thinking about how do you mitigate the challenges in the print market and grow, the emerging sides of your business to grow the overall pie. Obviously digital, display, data, video, programmatic, all that good stuff. So that's what keeps me up at night.
So it seems that publishers are tapping more and more into influencer marketing and, seeing this as a valuable form of revenue and advertising. So can you tell us a little bit about what Conde Nast is, how you guys are using influencer marketing specifically under the group that you oversee?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the media world is obviously extremely fragmented right now, and I think as we all try to deal with that fragmentation, there aren't enough hours in the day, and so I think, we're in a place in which it's all about bigger, fewer partnerships. And so when you think about historically what has happened when kind of influencer marketing was, kind of originating, you had kind of your national brands like a Bon Appetit or an Epicurious, and then you had different budgets earmarked for influencer marketing. And so, as we think about our business and strategically kind of like getting to that place in which, we can be a one-stop shop, we developed an influencer marketing end-to-end solution so that, we can go to partners and work with them across all of their different budgets. And so, when we think about, influencer marketing, we think about it in a similar way to how we think about, sales and marketing of our owned and operated brands, which is really distinctly looking at creative services, creative strategy, creative production, and then media distribution, and really thinking about how we can drive those two distinct things. And sometimes you charge for them each separately. Sometimes one is added value for the other. And so you just try to be as obviously flexible and accommodating to, whatever partner that you're working with to make the deals happen.
Yeah, I remember when we were talking earlier, you were saying how having influencer marketing as an offering has really made you guys sort of like a one-stop shop for clients, which I think is really interesting. And are there some examples of campaigns that you could talk about that you guys have found successful?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I need this. So. Everyone can hear me or no? Yeah. Or you're?
It's for the folks at home.
Oh, there's a machine. Okay. Okay, so I will keep the microphone. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like every single campaign, I think, really has influencers as part of it. I mean, the whole idea of what we're doing is co-creation, and I think we look at some of the challenges that I think publishers or content providers have is when you have an editorial staff and we're all working in this content marketing space. It's challenging for our editorial team because they have to produce content for all the social platforms, for the owned and operated websites, for the print vehicle, et cetera. And so there's more, platforms to produce content than ever. And then additionally, we have to figure out, okay, how are we working together as the business side and the editorial side in co-creating and doing those things, right? And there's only so much that, individuals can do. So I think for us, our influencer marketing programs are really editorially led. We have a group of people that are editorially vetted, that are relationships that our editorial team has, right? That are very on brand, have our tonality, have our aesthetic. They just don't happen to work for us, from a full-time capacity. And so we really use our influencer network in a lot of ways as kind of like an extended talent agency outside of Bon Appetit and Epicurious. And so, again, as we go to market, we are constantly talking about co-creation and working together with advertisers from a creative content generation standpoint. And usually the best content programs are about storytelling. Storytelling, I think, in general is more impactful from a first-party perspective. And so you're always thinking about, like, who is the right talent to communicate whatever story is being told. And again, you have a finite amount of people on your editorial team, and you don't want to keep using the same people over and over again on every single campaign that you're using. So, it's really hard to give you an actual example. Michelob Ultra, Whole Foods, Target, the list goes on and on, but really our influencer offering, like when we go to market, is treated as an asset right alongside Bon Appetit and Epicurious. So that's why it's such a kind of evergreen part of every deal that we do. I think there is a tendency, because influencers aren't owned assets by our company, to almost sometimes treat an influencer network as a secondary asset or something that you talk about kind of, again, separately from your brands. We really talk about, here's what the Food Innovation Group is. The Food Innovation Group is comprised of Bon Appetit, Epicurious, our influencer network. So it's really, we do treat this as a distinct brand and a distinct asset, which I think has created a kind of a reality in which influencers are really part of probably 80% of the campaigns that we work on.
And I remember you referred to them almost as if like a freelancing network, yes. Right? Like the way you use influencers would be similar to the way you would, freelance a photographer or something like that. But then it's a network that you can offer to clients, right? So why do you think publishers like Conde Nast are finding value in using influencers versus other types of marketing?
Well, I think that in terms of like the value that I think a publisher gets from an influencer network, I would say, again, that really comes down to not wanting to completely overwhelm your editorial team with brand advertising related requests. Also the fact of, we need to co-create with our editorial team, but there is a reality that our editorial team is producing content for consumers. And so if they are the face of like every ad campaign that we're doing, it does affect, credibility to some degree. You can't, if they see you, in the supermarket, on every aisle, kind of like holding up, boxes of mac and cheese and soup cans, at some point it's like the editorial integrity, I think, does take a hit. So I think you need to, and people want to hear from different voices and different perspectives. So I think the value that a Conde Nast gets from
very authentic.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So the value that we get from an influencer network, I think, is a diversification in talent, regardless if it's on our full-time staff or not. I think the value that a brand gets from working with a publisher that has an influencer network strategy is economies of scale and efficiencies. I think, again, everything's fragmented, which also means that agencies and clients are having to take more meetings than they ever did before to understand the landscape. So if you, again, trying to do more with less time, how do you find those partners, those single points of contact that can help you stretch your budget and create pieces of content that are on brand, part of your strategy, but then do that across both like alignment with national media brands, again, like a Bon Appetit or an Epicurious, but also through kind of, whatever you're trying to get out of your influencer marketing budget. So I, again, really look at it as what does our client need and how do we build our business around that so they can come to us and work with us more closely, deeper with single points of contact.
Yeah, there was a study recently, I think that like 4 out of 10 marketers don't really know how to, see their ROI when it comes to influencer marketing. So how do you guys measure that? How do you measure the success of a campaign that you would do for a client?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on what the goals of the advertiser are for that campaign, and I think they're all different. what we try to like from a strategic standpoint, I'm trying to create paths for whatever outcome an advertiser is ultimately looking for. So if that is awareness, then we can do Miller Brown, we can do all of those type of kind of like more awareness type of studies. If it's a sales lift piece, then we have a partnership in place with Nielsen to help understand kind of how is this media affecting actual SKU level purchase activity. So I think it's less about like what is that like one single metric that is going to be an umbrella for all influencer campaigns, and it's really about I think business leaders that have these assets that they're working with advertisers on, making sure that they understand what are like the 4 or 5 main KPIs that they're looking for, and then creating very clear paths to achieve those KPIs, and making sure that there is a recurring optimization conversation and schedule to again get to that path, because no matter how good the strategy is or how good the media plan is or the content, it always needs to constantly be looked at and optimized for whatever outcome you're looking for.
And what do you think they're usually looking for? Have you seen like a trend in the type of success that the type of engagement that they want from these campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways optically that people show what the KPIs they're looking for. The net is they are looking to move product. And I think the reality is like if we're not proving how we're moving product, then that budget is in likelihood going to get cut next year. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the way of the world. I mean, especially in the CPG space where you're moving to zero-based budgeting. The fact is, no matter how much of an awareness play any influencer marketing campaign has, if you don't track that down to more of bottom of the funnel metrics and prove the fact of like how you're driving traffic to their site, how you are moving their products on shelf, I think any vanity metric that we put out there or anything that we rally around from an awareness standpoint, at some point it's going to go up the food chain and somebody's not going to care because they didn't have a good sales quarter. So to me, the ultimate metric is how are we moving products, and there's no one easy way of doing that. So it's we're on this constant quest of creating the best system and creating the best infrastructure and finding the best data partners to prove out how we are impacting sales.
And what kind of trends have you seen in influencer marketing and things that are doing really well right now, and then things that maybe are sort of on their way out?
Repeat that one more. Sorry, one more time.
In terms of the campaigns that you've done or that you've seen, what do you think are some things that you've seen are usually very successful, and then some trends that you see are on their way out of the game?
Yeah, so in terms of like what's working, I would say that we Conde Nast acquired a company about 6 or 12 months ago called CitizenNet. And CitizenNet started as a social media analytics platform. They were one of Facebook's first marketing partners. But they also have like kind of evolved into, for lack of a better term, like a social DSP. It's plugged into, Facebook's API and you can buy across all the different platforms. What's interesting about that tool is that my team has access to essentially pull data on, say that we're talking about like Taco Bell, for example, right? We can pull audience data based off Taco Bell from like a pre-sale standpoint and say, okay, here's the age, like based off everyone who follows Taco Bell on Facebook, here is the age, they're engaged, they live in these DMAs. Like we're able to create like profiles based off of who's following them on Facebook. And then based off that, who are the right influencers to actually call up and leverage for that campaign based off those audience insights. So I think something that's really working well is, as opposed to like, I think sometimes it's like an emotional guess, like you look at a brief and you say, okay, I think these influencers make sense. It being a very data-driven approach, and I know
it's like very automated, right?
Exactly. And also we're able to estimate from a distribution standpoint the quality score of that influencer and how well how well the earned media will be on an organic post, or how efficient we can get the CPV or the CPM cost on a paid post, right? So there's kind of like two benefits for that. I think it maximizes earned media, minimizes the paid support behind it or the margins of that, but it also helps us identify the right influencers and makes it less of a qualitative assumption or, relying too much on the brief, because I think we've all been in situations in which like you look at a brief, but then you look at the actual brand, and those two things are like almost whatever the brief says, you do not get that from actually looking at who their audiences are on their social platforms. So it's just another like kind of check and balance to kind of help create the right solution. In terms of what is on the way out, I think what's on the way out is the biggest thing that I've noticed, I think, is that the usage rights on programs have very high costs because of all the different ways. Like, for example, if you're shooting something with an influencer and they are the star of this campaign, and then the brand wants to use that asset on programmatic, for example. I mean, theoretically, you have to tell them, okay, it's going to run on 1,000 sites, and then they create a licensing fee based off it running on 1,000 sites. And I think those are the quickest ways that I think influencers price themselves out of the market. I mean, the reality is that there is an earned, like, even if there's paid support behind things, the fact that, depending on, again, we use more, I would say more often than not, we're using, micro influencers on an everyday basis versus like the 1 million followers or the 100,000 followers. It's like the 10 to 25,000.
And why is that? Is it just lower risk?
I think it's lower. I mean, one, the costs are lower. I think the negotiations are a little easier. Anybody that has a certain 100,000 or 1 million, trying to deal with their agents, I think, is just very challenging. And it gets back to kind of like the problems that we were talking about. But I also think that the 25,000-ish on Instagram is a mark of like somebody who has a good following, but is not too big to the point that the message can still feel authentic. The person that is receiving the story, the listener, if you will, can put themselves in that person's shoes. Sometimes if it's, if they're too big, it's almost, you have a hard time relating to it. And I think, again, as we think about being storytellers and usually the most impactful stories being from a first-party perspective, it's really important finding that person that can tell a story and connect with that desired audience and not just has the biggest following and you can get the most bang for your buck.
And so why would a marketer find it valuable to go through you to access your influencer network versus, interacting directly with the influencer? So
I think it becomes more, getting back to some of the earlier points that we talked about in terms of just media fragmentation and not enough time in the day. I think, what we want to be able to do is, again, create this really like end-to-end solution in which like you can have like a single points of sales and marketing contacts and get all of your media needs covered across the board. And I think when you look at what our influencer infrastructure is, and so, we have a partnership with Speaker, which I'm sure a lot of people in the room know who Speaker is, but essentially it is a social CRM tool that automates the curation and the administrative process of influencers, the rights, uploading posts, getting the copyright, things of that nature. So that's almost like the pre-sale aspect of it. And then CitizenNet, which we just talked about, which is owned by Conde Nast, is our social distribution platform. So when you start thinking about our influencer network, again, thinking about creative strategy, creative services, creative production, and then you think about media distribution, Speaker is the former, and CitizenNet is the latter. And when you really look at those two things put together, it is a full-service influencer marketing shop that is nestled within a larger kind of national media or an asset that has a few national media brands. So again, I think personally that, versus kind of training people on these platforms, dealing with retention, attrition, things of that nature, I think it's almost like why a client outsources agency work is the same reason why they would work with us from an influencer standpoint. They're outsourcing, they know they have this need, and they look at us as a one-stop shop that can solve their media problems.
Because you sort of have the technology to automate a lot of, what goes into, like you were saying, the time and effort it takes to find an influencer that matches what the client wants and then how to distribute it, right?
Absolutely. And it really just becomes about the level of service that we are able to provide being the key differentiator. If we don't do a good enough job on client service, then they should want to just do it directly themselves. But if we provide the right level of service, I think that the value is pretty clear.
And do you see more people turning towards influencer marketing, or do you think it's always going to be something that adds to, you know, what everyone is doing, but not necessarily something that you want to put a lot of, you know, all your eggs in a basket kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, there are a lot of times in which we will use like our influencer infrastructure, pull talent from there, and of course use their Instagram handles and their Facebook handles to organic and paid distribution, but we'll actually host the content natively, you know, on our video player or on our site. So I think influencer networks from a talent agency standpoint, a talent management standpoint, will always be here and will continue to grow as, you know, we're all working together to tell more stories, and we need more people to tell those stories. So I definitely think it is, you know, it is not a trend. It is definitely like here to stay, and it is a huge part of our business that I think will continue to be a bigger part of our business. I just think the use case of like using an influencer and using their individual social handles as a use case that, you know, may go up, may go down. I don't really have an opinion on that, but the actual need for like somebody in my seat to have an influencer network to be able to pull from talent that is editorially curated, that need is only going to go up as content marketing continues to grow.
Awesome, great. I think that's all the questions I have for you. Does anyone else have questions for Craig?
I'm wondering about data ownership. Do you own all the data that the influencers generate? They're all in your network, right? So yes. Okay.
So if they have a blog,
mm-hmm.
okay, part of the relationship that we have with influencers that have a blog is that DMPs are cost prohibitive, especially for a small business owner, which if you're an influencer, you're pretty much a small business owner. Mm-hmm. So part of the relationship that we have, if they are not a social only influencer, but have their own blog, is they leverage our relationship with Adobe Audience Manager, which is Conde Nast data management platform. Mm-hmm. So actually all of their first-party data on their websites are part of our first-party data offering that we can use for insights and targeting and all that good stuff. So on the web, it is. Social, again, we have CitizenNet, which is plugged into Facebook's API. So, you know, we have as much ownership over their data as we do our own social you know, Facebook really is, it's right. Facebook's first-party data. I guess it's our second-party data, and we have the same access that we do with the Bon Appetit or the Epi handles.
Okay. Cool. We could take maybe a question, but we are supposed to go to break now. We're almost back on.